Hi, this is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. In this episode, we first chat with Brian Hilko, a PGA professional and owner of the Golf Factory, an exciting new indoor golf facility outside of Chicago. Brian takes us through his life in the game, from his work with junior golfers to recently becoming a small business owner. Brian also provides some great insights for anybody looking to invest in a launch monitor or build out a simulator space in your home. I trust you'll see how this game has cast a spell on Brian, in a good way, and how he's passing that love of the game on to others. In Angle of Attack, Andrew and I talk about off-season development plans and setting your junior golfer up for success in 2024 and beyond. And Peter Flory is back to help me discuss a big idea for using artificial intelligence to develop golf courses. This episode is brought to you by FlagBag Golf Company. FlagBag makes custom golf bags and accessories using repurposed old golf flags. Each bag is truly a one-of-one. Go to flagbaggolfco.com for more information and mention Driven Golf to receive a free custom head cover with the purchase of one of their custom golf bags. With that, here's episode 5 with Brian Hilko. All right, Brian Hilko, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast, man. It's great catching up.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Jim. I'm so excited to be here. It's fun to catch up and talk a little golf.
Yeah, man, we go back probably 10, 12 years now, growing up through the Chicago golf scene. Yeah, I think we probably first met right around the 100-hole hike when that was getting up and running. You really helped get a big event started in 2012 at Flossmoor Country Club. You and your counterparts, like fellow assistant pros in the area, really helped that get up and running. We had a really successful event there.
Yeah, it was, I don't know how much you remember that day, but like my wife came to help and I just remember, like, I'm a very tight, I'm just not flexible at all. It's funny. I've run a marathon and I've done things and it's like my body just like tightens up to the point that I can't move. And I remember like the last 20 holes, like I barely made the 100 holes. And the last 20 holes, I was just chipping a 5-iron around Flossmoor from the ladies' tees, just trying on survival mode. But it was awesome. I mean, I look back at that 100-hole hike and I always followed you and your original website, Weibo Blogger. I found it because of the Chicago, you had all the Chicago courses listed. And It was like when I was getting into golf architecture and it was like, I was kind of like always probably at least a couple years behind your journey. And then when you started doing the 100-hole hike, it was just like, oh, this is a no-brainer. There's some way I can get involved, do something with you. And like, yeah, it was just awesome. It was a lot of fun, but it was my one and only 100-hole hike because I barely survived.
The one thing I remember about that day, I caddied for my best friend, Jeff Tang. He did it there. And I caddied for all of I guess he played 108 holes that day, 6 rounds. And his brother, he was working that day and he showed up at the very tail end and like caddied for like the last 9 holes. But like the pictures are him like carrying this bag as if he was there all day, and he just showed up for the last hour.
Getting the glory.
Yeah. I remember Jeff like finishing up. He didn't even say a word. He just like hopped in his car and just drove away. It's just like, okay, mission accomplished.
Flossmoor's a big golf course. Like it was awesome. I had such grand ideas. And my buddy Jonathan Decker, I think he played over 150. He was up there. He got close to your number, but I had these grand, at least to play like 125. And I remember I was like at hole 90 and I was just like, I need to make it 10 more holes. I mean, because that is a big hilly golf course. And it was definitely survival there at the end for me.
Yeah, that 17th and 18th hole at Flossmoor, which has like a storied history, but just like tough holes on any day, much less your 6th or 7th round of the day. So Brian, I'm just thrilled to have you because I think you're somebody who, man, I think of somebody who just loves golf. You're at the top of the list of folks that I know. Your energy and passion for the game is just super infectious. And I know that you and I over the years, like, just thinking about the game and like trading ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other and just being a sounding board for each other as we've sort of navigated different paths throughout the game has been awesome. It's something that I've really treasured and valued that relationship. And I've been really excited to see sort of your growth in the game and some of the new ventures that you've been in. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about your latest venture, which I see in the background of your video. It looks like a really cool spot. So we'll talk quite a bit about, this business venture that you've started up recently. Super excited about that. Also, we're in this sort of this season where folks are, especially in the Midwest, like not really playing golf outdoors and thinking about indoor golf or maybe simulator golf. And I know you know a lot about a lot of things golf related, because I think you basically think about the game 24/7. But I think you have a lot of expertise in the area in terms of launch monitors, simulators, getting spaces set up, and hopefully can be a resource for folks there. But why don't we go back just in terms of like your origin in the game? Like, what got you started in the game, and like when did you get the bug? Because like you've got the bug about as bad as anybody I know.
I have some issues. It's funny. Like I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, I consider myself. I mean, I don't want to be like brag about it, but I was like, I do feel that way, that I'm one of the most obsessed golf people on earth, and I feel like I'm friends with the 5 other people who are obsessed as me, and you're one of them. So it's just, it's a game that's definitely dominated my life, and it's, there's the people that like love to play golf. They'll play 7 days a week and not stop. I could go a month without playing, but it's all I think about. It's like the whole encompassing thing. It's the history of the game, golf architecture, equipment. I just geek out about everything about it. It's and it's so funny. Like my dad, I was probably like 7, and my dad took me to Twin Lakes. It was in Westmont, Illinois, a little par 3. Dragged me along with my grandpa and played. I had never played the game up to that point, and I hit the 9th green in regulation, and I still remember it. And it was literally like, that was like the flip of a switch. And from that moment on, it was like I was obsessed until I am to this day. It hasn't changed. And it's, I remember like, I think I had my dad buy me clubs like the next day. And it was just like, there was this course up on my grandma's lake house that was like $8 to play all day. Like just a little farmland golf course. And my parents would drop me off at like 8 a.m. and then come back for dinner and get me off the golf course. And that's all I would do at the lake house. It was just, I was obsessed from day one. I don't know what it is about the game, but it just sucked me in. I love it too much.
So what led to you deciding like, hey, I want to pursue this as a profession, like as a vocation?
Well, it's funny for me. It was a little. It is kind of a different story from how I started. It was, I played competitive golf through high school and then a little bit in college, and then I got injured. I fractured my elbow. I still to this day can't straighten out my elbow. So I remember I went 2.5 years without swinging a golf club. So it's completely walked away from competitive golf. And I was actually I was in the Whole Foods regional just post college, and I started missing golf. So I remember the first time I had MP 29s irons. I had like a 975D driver. So like a player set. And I remember I went to Sidney Maravitz in the city to play, and I whiffed on the first tee. Like after playing competitive golf my whole life, went to go swing and completely missed the ball. And it was just like, it was embarrassing, but it just right back. It's like I snapped right back into it. I mean, I think I hit like about the 7th hole. I started to find it. I hit the center of the sweet spot, the center of the club head finally, and started hitting balls every day. And then I started talking to people in the golf business. And because at first I was afraid of the golf business. Everyone talks negative about it. You never play. And there's some truth to that. I don't need to go down the whole negative path. But, I just realized like I'm not playing golf in the real world. Even if I'm not playing golf, at least I'm around golf in the golf business. So I got my game back together, and then took a job at Royal Melbourne up in Long Grove, and kind of the rest is history. And, went down and became a PGA member and got through that, and got back into the golf business. So that's how I kind of a weird way to get back in. But, because of that injury and kind of stepping away from competitive golf, and really kind of discovering architecture, like I had played some places I really loved, but like that kind of brought the hit and chase mentality. Even though I was a golf pro, kind of just like rekindled this whole new side of my love for the game, and really has taken me into my adulthood, and my obsession with the game.
You mentioned sort of the negative aspect of being an assistant pro, and it's not a glamorous job by any means, right? There's long hours, like you said. Maybe you don't get a ton of opportunity to play, but that was the one thing that I really remarked meeting you and getting to know you, is that I think you just love being around the game in any capacity. Like that really fills up your tank. I just saw like your love of the game just continue to grow. And then also I think the relationships you formed with other folks like relatively your age, like other assistants at other clubs. And I think you could probably tell some stories about just the crazy like Monday, you got the Monday off and getting access to other clubs based on your contacts and your network, or maybe taking a road trip down to different points throughout, all over the Midwest. I know you probably had some crazy adventures on that front.
Definitely. I can remember I had a very good friend who actually he's a golf pro I met through Golf Club Atlas, which is a website that I just obsessed over for a long time. But he was working at Anawensia and I was at Hinsdale. And we would get in the car Sunday as soon as we got off of work and drove basically wherever we could get on, someplace cool that we had heard of or we had read on GCA or we'd seen on. And I remember we came up with the idea, like we kept pushing it further and further. And we booked, we somehow in the course of one day got on we have White Bear Yacht Club. I'm zoning out here. The three big Donald Rosses in Minneapolis. And we drove up all of Sunday night, got like within an hour of the border, slept, got up in the morning, played all day, then got back in the car and drove all the way back to Chicago with no sleep. And then both went and worked our Tuesday ladies days at the club. And I think it cost Jonathan his job at Anawensia. His boss was so mad at him for being exhausted and just like, but that's just how we were. It's like we were so obsessed with seeing as many new places as we could and just getting out there. And the nice thing with the golf business, you work a ton, but you get some access to some really cool places. And we definitely took advantage and we drove everywhere and went and played. And it was like, I may not have gotten to play as much as everyone else. I might have played once a week or once every other week. But when I did play, I got to play somewhere really cool that just, it opened my eyes to a whole different side of golf I never even knew about as just a kid playing public courses in Chicago growing up and getting to see some of these places that I never imagined. It was incredible experience. And it's I couldn't do it now, but I'm glad I took advantage in my 20s when I had the energy and the time to do it.
Yeah, that's great. And based on your sort of upbringing, as you said, through public golf and just like your love of architecture, the one thing that I really treasured about your love of the game and this love of exploring is like I think you really valued sort of the no frills, underrated sort of hidden gems that you would uncover, not just like the flashy stuff that's highly rated or, ultra exclusive, but just finding those hidden gems throughout the Midwest. And there's a treasure trove of golf courses, both public and private, throughout the Midwest. So why don't we spend a little bit of time there? Like maybe we go like Wisconsin, Illinois. Say somebody doesn't have access, we'll start there. But if you were going to take a trip to one of those areas and you were thinking, okay, hidden gems, budget friendly, what would be some of the places that you would recommend?
Yeah, I would. I want to start this first by I will say for anyone out there who doesn't have access. I went on a trip that kind of changed my golf perspective. Went out east, played some of the big boys, and it was an incredible trip. But what that trip kind of taught me when I got back was some of the country clubs that I was like thought were so amazing and so good. I kind of realized that they weren't as special as I kind of made them out to be, and it also made me more hyper aware of some of these like hidden gems. I was like, oh, this place I've been playing forever is way better than I ever imagined. And, and fills the tank way more than, trying to find these, just another country club that might just be kind of an average golf course, but it's just a really nice place. When kind of my change as I got older is I started seeking out more, especially down the Langford rabbit hole here in the Midwest. There's so many of his golf courses that are just kind of, no one's touched. They're not known. They're kind of tucked away. And it's like, because the clubs had no money, they'd never, modified the golf course. And you just have these insanely awesome places that, are just incredible golf courses that just don't get appreciated because they're not maintained. Maybe just like some of the big boys or, and they're just, and they're off the beaten path. For Illinois, my two that go-tos for sure, I'd say one's just over the border in Wisconsin, and one's down in Kankakee, but they're the two I drive back and forth is Spring Valley and Kankakee Elks are an absolute no-brainer. Kankakee Elks to me is, if that course was fully restored with the volcano hole and everything, to me it would be a top 5 in Chicagoland. I know it's down in Kankakee, so it's kind of fringe, but that golf course that set of greens is one of the best set of greens I've ever played. And that's like, it's up there with obviously Lawsonia. They're one of their better, but even like the Chicago Golfs of the world and Seth Rayner, if you've played any kind of Seth Rayner golf course, I would put those Langford set of greens with the similar shaping with the steam shovel. What he did at Kank, just the internal contouring there is just unreal. I played that place couple hundred times and it never gets boring. It is, and what I like about Kank versus Spring Valley, if we're talking those two, because they're both Langford golf courses, Kank keeps the mowing lines a lot better on the greens. There's a lot less greens that they have to recapture. So I find myself liking to go down to Kank a little bit more. Spring Valley, I find myself hitting more every club in the bag. It definitely challenges my long game a little bit more. But those two places, if you're in Chicago, are must-sees. If you got to come up, you got to come with an open mind because they are a little rough around the edges, but those are my two go-to spots for sure. Another couple underrated gems here in Chicago. I don't know if you've ever played Cedardell out in Plano.
No.
It's a 9-hole. I don't even know who designed it. It's somebody who knew what they were doing designed it, and it's a really cool piece of property. It's you pull up, it's flat, right off the back of the clubhouse, but you see the 9th green. A lot of movement, and you're like, all right, there might be something here, but everything else looks kind of plain Jane. And then you get to the second hole. It's this cool little dog leg left, par 4, just gentle dog leg, but the ground really drops down. There's probably about 40 feet of elevation change down into this valley behind that green where the majority of the golf course sits. And this green slopes away from you, kind of start of that hill. It's just some really cool holes, some really cool green sites, works up and down the side of this giant hillside, and it's just a fun little track. When I was working out at Orchard Valley, I would sneak over there all the time because Plano is a little bit of a drive, but I like that. I love kind of getting out in the country too, that laid back feel. I like the fact that like the people playing it don't even realize what they have. They just know this is their town golf course, but little do they know they actually have an architecturally significant golf course, and it's like, and then you can play for like $20. So it's like, there's a lot of wins, but it's worth the drive out there. But those would be kind of the three I like to see. There's a cool Robert Trent Jones, like early in his career, he did a 9-hole out in St. Charles called Potawatomi. It's got an entire island hole, par 3 out on the Fox River. And it's just, it's got a really quirky first hole. It's like a 90-degree dogleg right, really awkward. But once you get past that, there's some cool bunkering. Greens are gentle sloping on the greens, but they're well shaped, and it's just a cool little routing. It's I don't know what it is about the 9-hole courses that just kind of suck me in, but those would be my kind of like underrated Chicagoland courses. And then going up into Wisconsin, my favorite by far is Eagle Springs. I don't know, have you made it up to Eagle Springs?
No, I haven't been up there.
So Eagle Springs is the oldest course in Wisconsin, and it's got the greatest volcano hole of all time. Like, there's no comparison. Like, Donald Ross would blush if he saw this volcano green. And it's just I remember one day we paired it up. So we played Eagle Springs, then we drove into Milwaukee, and we actually had a tee time at Blue Mound, which is one of Seth Rayner's best sets of greens. And everyone who I dragged all the way out to Eagle Springs, like, said the 4 best holes we played today were at Eagle Springs. And it's like crazy that like this little 9-hole golf course, but it's just an awesome, awesome place. It's like the 4th generation owner. And then the current owner, it's crazy. Nobody in the family wanted it. So one of the daughters said she would take it. Her husband actually is the head sports psychologist for the Brewers also. And they decided to take this on because they wanted to keep the golf course in the family. So he takes care of the golf course, and he's also a psychologist for the Brewers. So it's a pretty wild, a lot going on there. So I highly recommend checking that place out because it's an easy stop if you're going up to Erin Hills or Lac La Belle or going up to to any of the course to Sand Valley. You can make a quick, easy stop from Chicago or Milwaukee on the drive up. So I highly recommend that place.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin is turning into quite a golf, hotbed just with the growth of Sand Valley and now Lido and Sedge Valley. And then obviously like Lawsonia, you mentioned earlier, can hang with any of those courses, I feel, in Wisconsin as well. Yeah.
It's a place I visit every year. It's just Lawsonia to me is just like like people in Chicago will be like, what's it like to play Chicago golf? And I'm like, literally, you can just go to Lawsonia. And it is, I'm not saying they're the same golf course, but you get a lot of the same fun shots. It's similar shaping. It makes you think on every shot. There's so many cool, risk reward shots. And even though there's a lot of width, you just got to think your way around. And those golf courses, both to me, are, Lawsonia is such an incredible place that I recommend to everyone who's making that Wisconsin trip.
Yeah, you mentioned Long Island golf. I mean, there's hints of Shinnecock, I think, when you're out at Lasonia for sure. Hey, one quick thing on going back to Potawatomi. My origin story in golf actually is from Potawatomi Golf Course in
No
St.
way. Are you
Charles. So,
serious?
yeah, so I grew up in the neighboring town, but my grandparents lived in St. Charles and played Potawatomi quite regularly. And when I was even, man, like this is probably 4 or 5 years old, for some reason they my grandparents were about to tee off at the golf course, and my parents were taking my brother and I to a parade, but for some reason we stopped off at the course to see my grandparents first before we were supposed to go to this parade. And I had never been exposed to golf before, and I looked at the golf course and I was like, I don't want to go to the parade, I want to check this thing out. And to my parents' credit and to my grandparents' credit, they let me tag along. So they let me tag along my grandparents while they played. And I don't remember hitting any shots or whatever, but I was just so drawn to what that game, what it was and what it was about. And then we just met up with my parents later that afternoon.
It's a
And that
great
was really
site.
yeah, that was my first experience with, and then I played there probably hundreds of times because it was dirt cheap. It was 9 holes. They used to run, I don't know if they still do, but they used to run the St. Charles City match play, which is a pretty like prestigious event that would span over like 3 weekends. And my buddies and I, the Tang brothers, which we would all play in that and get, do the qualifying and get flighted and go through the
That's
match play.
awesome.
Yeah. It's a great event. There's one other recent event where our sort of golf lives have intertwined. So like I mentioned, you were the assistant pro at Hinsdale Golf Club. And I imagine you spent a lot of time like doing junior clinics and teaching some of the up and coming players. So there was one, high level golfer that came out of your club, Mac McClear, who is now a 5th-year senior, I believe, at the University of Iowa. I think he won the Big Ten 2 years in a row. But in any case, my son Luke was paired up with him at the U.S. Amateur for the first 2 rounds of qualifying this summer, and it was just like what a small world, just this connection, and it's just like how great the game is. Like the people that you meet, and it's like, oh, a friend of a friend, or this person, see somebody with like a logo on their shirt, and it's like, oh, do you know so and so? Like, of course they do, right? It's just great how the game just keeps giving that way. And Luke had a really great time with Mac, and we've been following his college career here as he's I think probably going to be going professional next year. But you sort of just root for these guys because you played with them, had a good experience, and he was great to Luke during those 2 days.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, when you sent me the message that obviously that Luke had gotten in, I was so excited. But then when he told me that he was playing with Mac, my mind was blown. It was I'll tell one cool Mac story was so he comes from a golfing family. Like his grandpa won, I believe, the Michigan State Am, and both his dad and his uncle are incredible players. And but Mac, when he was like 6 years old, his parents just wanted someone to like take him on the golf course because he was already so obsessed with golf. And I'll never forget, he had like an 85-yard shot, and he's like 6 years old, and it's an uphill shot. And I was asking, I was like, Mac, like, what are you going to do here? Like, what are you going to play? And he told me he was going to play a cut hybrid to take some yardage off the shot as a 6-year-old. And I was like, I've never had a kid that young talk through a golf shot like that. And you knew, I didn't know how good he was going to be, but you knew like there's something to be said. Like, you can spot talent a mile away, and it was easy to spot with him. But yeah, it's just been fun to see both their paths cross at basically the highest level of amateur golf. Is just incredible. It's so neat. I'm so happy for the both of them because they're such good kids. It's just awesome to see.
Yeah, and I believe Mac's dad is like really close friends with Mike DeVries, the golf course architect, Kingsley Club and Cape Wickham and others. So it's just another connection there as well.
I know. Crazy. They're actually, I don't know. I mean, I've heard this argument made like, on how a golf course, where you grew up playing and how it affects your golf. But Mac grew up playing at Crystal Downs and Hinsdale was his 2 courses because his whole family grew up at Crystal. But and his short game obviously is very good. And the tiny greens at Hinsdale, he's such an incredible ball striker. I just wonder how those 2 golf courses kind of affected the player that he is. It definitely shows because he is an incredible ball striker.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you talked about this, like the talent identification, like you've probably seen all sorts of juniors coming through the ranks. And I imagine, you're seeing juniors come in your new space now. have you sort of observed like differentiating factors, whether it be like hard work or just dedication or just like attention to detail, like those sorts of things where you realize like, oh, that kid's going places?
It's so hard. We've all seen that kid dominate like at 10, 11 years old and then just fizzle out. It's amazing. There's kids that I swore that were going to make it and were like shoo-ins. And then, they get to that final level and they just can't take that final step, and it's interesting because like Hinsdale Central played at Hinsdale Golf Club and they won, I think it was 8 straight state titles. And that was basically during my entire time working there. So I got like a firsthand, whether working with a lot of the players or just watching them play up close. And there was a kid, Brendan O'Reilly, incredible player, but he went to Illinois and he had all the limelight on that team. And, and I don't, for whatever it was, he never really took that next step in college. He's a great player and I think he's still going to try to really, but he overshadowed Mac. And then Mac never really came out of nowhere. But I remember Mac broke the course record at tryouts his senior year and kind of went on a tear and then went to play for Iowa, still under the radar. No one was really talking about it. And then he ends up winning the Big Ten. And it's just, but one thing I'll say about Mac, and what I've seen a lot is he just has that love for golf, and I think that's a big part of it. He just like obsesses over the game and the drive's just there. Like Mac would just, there was no one who was motivating Mac. Mac was motivating Mac, and I think there's something to be said about that. Also a crazy thing where, it's the Zach Johnsons of the world where, playing sixth on a golf team. And then, he ends up winning 2 majors and, how kids develop. I think everything's different, it's, and figuring out how to go low is, there was a member, Rob Gruby at Hinsdale. He was the captain of a national championship Stanford team. And he was the only guy on his team, I think, that didn't go pro. And, he was an incredible player. Like he could go out on an extreme, like on a US Open setup and shoot around par, but he'd also shoot around par on, an easier setup that the guys are going 18 under on, and 20 under on for the week. And it's a difficult road to kind of, as you go to each level and kind of keep leveling up. And there's probably other instructors who work with high level juniors all the time and they can pinpoint it better than I can. But there was plenty of kids that I thought would make it to the PGA Tour that didn't, and there's kids that I didn't think had a shot and they became elite players. So it's another example is a very close friend of mine. He didn't play on his high school team and he didn't play in college, and he's like a +5 now, wins section events. He doesn't play, and he's played some mini tour stuff and total late bloomer. He hit the ball 8 miles. That's all he cared about in high school, was hitting it as far as he could. He hits his ball speeds in the high 180s, low 190s. But then he figured out like late in college how to hit it straight and hit golf shots. And he went from like probably like a 5-6 handicap who couldn't keep it on the planet to being a unbelievable player. And I just think for a lot of the kids out there, it's like, don't lose that drive. And, golf's a crazy thing. You can figure it out at all different parts of life. And it's not something just because you hit some downtimes and you run into some speed bumps. You got a whole lifetime to keep improving. It's like there's even the crazy stories of guys who make it on the senior tour who never played on the PGA Tour. So it's golf's a wild ride.
Yeah,
so keep your head up out there.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, I think the one thing from my perspective as a parent of a junior golfer is I protect my son's love for the game like it is like like the nuclear secret. Like it's just like the thing above all else. I want to make sure that is maintained, because I think, like you said, that's going to carry you for a lifetime, really. And anybody who's listened to the first 30 minutes of this interview, like you have this infectious energy and love for the game. So I think I have to believe that you're able to impart some of that energy and just love for the game to the juniors that you're working closely with. And probably Mac got some of that from you through osmosis, and that's carried him. So I think just to be able to have that impact on junior players has to be extremely rewarding.
It does. I've always loved working with juniors, and even this place, where I'm working now, it's just fun. I've always believed in game-based learning, and just like I've always I've been the teacher that's been more focused on getting your kid like addicted to golf. Like I look at like my own son, he's not even 3 yet, and we've started playing golf. And it's like my goal with him is to just find that love. I know like with a lot of kids out there, if you can get them to love the game, first of all, you give them something they can enjoy for their entire life. With golf, it's amazing. It's like, one sport is once you get addicted, it's so easy to self motivate. It's one of those things, it's just so addicting. So I've always made my junior teaching more about helping kids find that love of the game and making it fun. And I've always used a lot of game based learning, and that's things we do here. And it's just, I think there's a lot of teachers out there who can take your kid to the next level. But where I stand out is I'm just going to get your kid in love with golf, and it's my big slogan here is we take your kid from top golf to real golf. And, and it's just, that's what I want to do. I want them to find out how awesome this game is, because it's life changing. I've met so many amazing people in this game, and it's, so many cool experiences in this game. I've gone to places I never imagined I would be, like on the edge of the earth, just chasing a ball around a field. And it's just because I love this game, and I hope I can pass that along to the, hopefully my next generation here, and other kids too.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. So you, a few years ago, or a couple years ago, had this dream. Like you made a huge leap of faith,
Yes.
which was to go away from the professional like golf pro circuit to becoming a small business owner and opening up your own space. And I think it is recently opened, and it seems like it's going gangbusters. Can you talk a little bit about the space that you have? It's outside Chicago. It's called the Golf Factory in Mount Prospect. But just like a little bit about just that decision, because one of the things, knowing you for years, I always like observed that you had this creative energy and this nervous energy. I think where, like I could see that this was coming. Like this was always on the horizon, but to actually make it happen and put it into place. I imagine your wife Michelle is also instrumental in just like being supportive in terms of like chasing this dream and doing this journey together. Can you talk a little bit about that whole process? Because I think it's a fantastic journey that you've been on. I'm really excited for you.
Yeah, it's been a wild journey. I never felt as a golf pro, I never got to use, going back to that nervous creative energy. I know I've heard you talk about it, but I was doodling golf holes left and like every notebook I've ever had, like outside the blue like ruler line at the edge there was always dogleg holes around the corner, and like I was always doodling stuff and logos and other things golf related. And as a golf pro, I never felt I got to show off like that creative side of me. There was no like, except in golf shots, that was the one spot that I could do it. So it was like I always wanted to create my own space, whether it was an actual golf course or something golf related, where I could really let that creative energy out and really show it off. I'm very lucky. I have an incredible network. And I remember it's probably like 2018, I started working at sim places in the winter just to play golf and make a few extra bucks. And I remember my father-in-law, we were in there one night and I was like, do you think we could like build one of these? My father-in-law built his own house. He's just an incredible man. He owns he's a fireman, but he owned a bunch of rental spaces that he renovated and take care of himself. He's just like, he can just do anything. And I was like, you think we could actually build something like this? And he's like, yeah, we could get this done. And that just, as soon as he said that, it just got, I started thinking and creating the idea and kind of figuring out a plan. And, it's morphed over time. Originally, I started off, I just wanted to find a big warehouse, put a bunch of golf sims and practice area, and just create kind of a hardcore golf space. And that's where the Golf Factory name came from. And kind of post-COVID, I started to see some of these places succeed in retail and become a little bit nicer. And with my background and just kind of my creative eye, I just like, I felt like that was the way to go. I was like, I knew I could create something really cool indoors. Indoor golf is pretty vanilla. It's you're playing video game golf, but I always believe in those like power spots in golf. It's like you've been on those golf courses that have those spots that you just like sit there and it makes you emotional, whether it's this beautiful piece of land that, it's you're on the edge of the ocean, or It's just incredible. There's these spots, and I knew I couldn't create that indoors, but I knew I could create a spot that really honored the game and kind of really encapsulated my love for the game. And, I think this space it has a lot of cool little details that I've added to it. I've kind of taken all the things I love about golf and crammed it in here into this 9,000 square foot space. And it's, it definitely was a leap of faith, but my wife knew, how much of a kind of a golf psycho and just, when I put my head down and put my mind to it, she knows I'm very much like her dad. I'm very much like you, Jim. It's just, you're definitely someone who inspires me, who just kind of, once we get that tunnel vision on something. And, it's crazy looking back at it. I can't believe I made it this far, but I also can. It's like I kind of had a roadmap, but I had a lot of great people who helped me and got me through it. And now I have this incredible we have 10 TrackMan sims, restaurant, bar, and it's just a cool golf place, and it's I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about it, just some of the creative aspects of it, but like how have you been able to sort of differentiate it from, I don't know what else is in the Chicago area, but just like if people are imagining what an indoor golf space, or maybe they've been to one before in their area or their region, what do you think differentiates your space from others? What do you think makes you guys unique?
There's at first the first thing I came to is like, I wanted to focus on the playing experience because that's our product. So like things that matter to me is like our sims are massive. I wanted the screen to be huge, but not only huge, like the way I built the walls in between, it's very open. There's nothing above your head. There's diagonal walls that come down between the sims. So it's like you have this social side to it. Even though you're in your own stall, like if you're playing with a couple groups, it's like, it just it doesn't feel like you're going into like this enclosed box, and just hitting shots. It's a very open feeling. And then with the giant screen, it's very immersive what's in front of you. And it's, it's funny. Like I was very worried about like getting a cable box for every stall so they could watch whatever they wanted. Like it's except for like the random football game, like with the Bears playing, like I haven't had anyone like request anything on any of the TVs. Cause like the screen just like pulls you in because it's so monstrous. It's like 16 feet wide. As far as I know, all the sims that I played on, I went and played everywhere I could. They're about as big as anything out there, if not bigger. And that was a really important thing to me, was that playing experience. And then TrackMan. I mean, TrackMan just, they started off as everything that's incredible for good players, like with club head data and being able to read the ball and give us, it's changed the game. But last year was the first year in the history of their company, they recorded more indoor shots than outdoor shots. And they've really gone all in on the indoor golf world. And it's, there's 260 courses. The graphics are incredible. There's a lot of cool courses that I love, like La Hinch, and a lot of cool places you can play. And then there's a lot of cool mini games. So like, I think there's going back to kind of taking that golfer from Top Golf to real golf. It's like, they have all these cool, like a game that's like Candy Crush, but you're playing on TrackMan. So you're getting this hardcore data. It's it's funny when I watch the dads with their sons, they'll be playing this game that looks kind of mindless and just goofy. But then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to hit a 90-yard wedge shot and blow up this car that's basically like 8 feet wide. You're trying to hit a wedge shot to a very tight. And you start to realize like, oh, this is actually really cool, and like sucks you in. And it's just a different way to kind of experience golf. But it's you got these mini games, and then there's a lot of par 3 courses on there. So it's like, and then they have big courses, like you can play the Frisco course that just got put on there. And, you can play those, the Bo Welling course, you can play at like 3,900 yards. So what I really like is like, these sims aren't just for, they're not just for the typical adult that would play in, that you see at a lot of these sim places. They can accommodate any golfer, and there's a lot of cool different formats you can play on them. So that's definitely at the core. That was what was most important for me, because that is my product at the end of the day. But then as far as the overall space and kind of what I wrapped it in, I did kind of a modern industrial, a lot of wood and metal, and it just has like a lot of bright colors. As you can probably see behind me, I'm a lot brighter than your normal sim place, and it's just really friendly and inviting. There's this incredible kids putting game that I've played forever, like hours and hours on the putting green with my students. And it's called Cow Pasture Pool. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's
Let's hear it.
all it is like I always use like, obviously you got stripes and solids, but I like, it's, if you have younger kids, definitely get some like animal golf balls, and then like the other will be like fish golf balls or whatever, and break it up. So you say it might be 4 and 4, and then you have an 8 ball. And so the way the game works is, if you make it, you keep going. If you miss, your ball's just a stymie. And you can hit your golf ball into the other player's golf ball, and like it creates all this strategy. And you start to see it in young kids once they like figure out the first time they play, they'll always like hit their shot, and then when they get their next turn up, they're going to always try to finish out the ball that's close to the hole. But then they start to realize like, oh, if I leave this ball here and putt all my balls that are farther away, like these clear 8 blockers for like the other player, and you got to putt around them. And like, it's just incredibly addicting game. And so I got to build, like, in the middle of the space is an actual pool table putting green that you can play that game
awesome.
on. So it's like, so it looks really cool, but it's also like, I just from all the hours playing that game, like, because I've seen other like greens at these spaces and they just don't get used. They're there more for show. And I wanted something that was actually fun and interactive, and something you could come in and just use. I let people use it for free. So it's like, it's kind of like, hey, if you play an hour of sim time, you can go mess around on the putting green, and it's something to enjoy, and it's it's cool. So I just added a lot of kind of cool, authentic golf touches to the place, and unique things. It's just a really cool atmosphere. I'm super biased, but it's a really fun golf atmosphere here at Golf Factory.
I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, I think, that aspect of it, you're really going to get the hooks into kids years from now. Those same kids, introducing like the past your pool game to their kids. I mean, it's just like creating that generational like love for the game. I mean, that's just awesome that it's just a real intangible thing. Like, and you may never even see it, but it's there. Like, I know it's there. And I'm just super excited. Couldn't be happier. That's awesome.
It's so like, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I always like think about it. Like, I go past Ziegfeld Troy's, like this really cool par 3 course that like has been generationally owned by a bunch of golf pros, the Troy family. Really cool greens, but every hole's like sub 100 yards. And I always like think, it's like when I drive past there, it's like someone's playing their first round of golf there. Like, how cool that, like, there's all these other courses that we think about that we're always trying to play in, but like, you think of all the people like a place like that affects, and like getting them into the game and introducing. And it's like, that's kind of how I felt about this place, is like, there's a lot of cool golf courses and other things that people are going to talk about, but I'm hoping that like there'll be some kid somewhere who'll be like, man, like Golf Factory was such a cool place to learn to play golf and like kind of catch that bug. And, and it's like, they'll go to another sim place in another town. They'll be like, man, I wish this was as cool as Golf Factory. That's kind of what I'm hoping for.
I follow you on Golf Factory on Instagram, but you're running leagues, so you have this full gamut. So it's like, full social aspect with have a beer and spend time with your friends, hitting balls and playing a famous golf course. You probably have the hardcore guys that are really grinding and working on their game and renting a space once a week. I believe you've got like memberships as well, and then you got, like you said, like the gamification with the kids and lessons and everything. Like you're really kind of this full service, and really like a community of people that have kind of wandered in and gotten to know you and gotten to know the space and have used it as really very similar to like a country club or whatever, just like a real sense of community, right?
Yeah. And that's what, looking at this place, that's what I looked at. Like the things I love about golf, like I love competition. I love like also just like chasing a ball around, hitting it around. And then I love just like that time together with like my family. And I think of all like the cool trips I've gone on with my dad, and, and just all the fun times we've had. And like, I knew like with Golf Factory, it's like I can accomplish that, even though it's not the same. It's indoors. It's, we had a company out of Buffalo that does a lot of like the stadium banners and wool pennants. They did these cool like custom banners for me that I'm going to put the team names up of like my league winners, and I got stickers to put on the wall. So like anything cool you do in here, like I had a kid hole out a shot from 150 yards and he like wrote his name and put the sticker on the wall. I always love like when you go into a golf course and you can like, it's like an organic breathing thing. And it's like in here, some of like the details. And then also like, the way we designed the space, it was kind of because of the pillars. The one side's just like 5 sims in a row. But then the other side where I'm kind of sitting right now, there's 2 sims together, and then there's kind of 2 sims tucked away, and they have couch seating versus the high tops. And I had this really cool custom wallpaper done by Tide. It's got all these like 90s pop culture scenes with people playing golf. It's hilarious. But that space, what I really like about it is I'm seeing a lot of like families book that, and like I can bring my 4 or 5-year-old into, what some in previous, like other sim places you might look at as like a bar environment. Even though we have a bar, it's very much like you feel comfortable with your family coming in here and using the space, and it doesn't feel awkward like you're invading a men's only golf club, and it's that's what I was really hoping for. That's why I was so obsessed with making this place bright and colorful and fun. It's like I truly wanted it to be for everyone, and that's why the unified in golf tagline, like I'm trying to live up to it.
Yeah, that's great. So if somebody's in the Chicago area or maybe visiting Chicago and they wanted to check out the space or even start to come on a regular basis, where would be the first place they would turn to find out more information about it?
Yeah, you can just go to our website, just golffactory.golf. So simple place. We're just north of O'Hare Airport. So if you're in the area, and there's a really cool Mount Prospect Golf Club, really cool outdoor course. You could come check out indoor and then sneak over there and play a really cool outdoor course pretty much right next door to us.
Oh, that's cool. And I'll link to the website and your Instagram in the show notes. The one thing I wanted to shift gears a little bit, you mentioned TrackMan. And I think for an indoor space, like TrackMan's sort of the ticket to the door, right? It's sort of this like instant credibility. But from what I gather, like you have, I think, a pretty in-depth relationship with TrackMan. And they've recently launched this indoor only product, this TrackMan IO. And I believe you're like really one of the early adopters of that. So can you talk a little bit about that technology, what they've done, kind of migrating from, the TrackMan 4 has been around, has been like the gold standard for years. And like what you see as like the advantages of the TrackMan IO, not only for your space, but maybe somebody who's potentially looking to build an indoor simulator in their home.
Yeah, we're actually, I don't quote me on this, but I think we were the first place to put it in anywhere in the country. So it's, I know I was one of the first places to order it. We had only been open for like a month, and then it's like I see the commercial for TrackMan IO, and I'm like, oh, come on. But the only one that existed was the senior VP of TrackMan lives in Michigan, and I drove out there like overnight, like my old trips, to like test it out and hit it. And I've hit on every launch monitor, so I wanted to, if we were going to make that switch, I wanted to hit on it. And so far, I've been really impressed. TrackMan 4, if you're still from a practice side or you want to drag it outside, TrackMan 4 is still their top of the line unit. TrackMan IO is nice because like for someone, if you're limited on space or you're just going to have a fixed unit indoors, it definitely performs. Like if we're for like mini games, golf, it's a little bit faster reading. It's just smoother on the short game. It's definitely like if you're going to play indoor golf, it's definitely a better product. But when it comes to like teaching and fitting, and if I had a high level junior, like I'm definitely staying in the TrackMan 4. The TrackMan 4 is still, you can take it inside out. It gives you more club head data. But when it comes to, there's for indoor golf, the IO is just, it's cool. Like it's just like, especially for like the really young kids, like you can, sometimes with like the TrackMan 4, like if you hit a grounder and it was, you top a shot and it went a few yards, the TM4 would just kick it out. It wouldn't read it like for that shot indoors, where an IO, it picks up everything. So if I have my son's not even 3 and he plays on the TrackMan, when he plays like Magic Pond or any of the mini games, like he can literally hit a putt and the IO reads it. And that's just it's a big difference. So when you're playing golf, for the indoor golf experience, the IO is just, it's incredible. But if you're looking on the practice side, I still recommend the TM4 for that. Like we kept 2 TM4s. We have 8 IOs and 2 TM4s because for those ball pounders, and like myself, if I'm going to have a practice session where I'm just going to be working on my golf swing, I'm still going to the TM4 because it gives me, I get things like you don't get a tack angle on the IO. Basically anything that the launch monitor needs to be on the ground, you lose with the IO, but you do get a cool slow motion camera of contact with the IO that's really clean. So that's a neat function, but I definitely, the TM4 is definitely better for practice.
Oh, that's really cool. And I imagine they're going to knock it out of the park. The one thing with TrackMan, and look, I've owned, I guess, 3 different launch monitors over the last like 7 or 8 years. We recently migrated to TrackMan in the last year, but like TrackMan just like absolutely nails the software. So they had,
it's the best software in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't even scratched the surface on some of the gamification that you mentioned, which sounds really cool, but just like the ease of use and like the combines and like setting up tests, from a development and practice standpoint, it's just so seamless and so easy to use. And you mentioned the course library is great as well. But let's talk about, obviously that's sort of the gold standard, the Cadillac. There's a wide range of options, probably more now than ever, right? I think the pandemic, was probably a huge tipping point for golf simulators, where 8-10 years ago, it was more probably a luxury item and rare. It's being seen more and more. People are putting them in their garages, in their basements, or in their sheds, or what have you. And anywhere from probably starting at like $500 up to, tens of thousands of dollars. You said you've hit on most of them. Like, can you talk about a little about your experience, like maybe starting on the low end and some of the lessons and observations there, and then moving into sort of like the TrackMan and probably I would say probably the GC Quad is probably its closest competitor in that space, right?
There are so many good launch monitors, and I haven't even hit on like some of like the Mevos and the Bushnell. I haven't even personally hit on those, but I think of like all the launch monitors out there. Like, I built some basic, I have some friends who have some cool basic setups, and they're even playing on a SkyTrack. And like, I look at the SkyTrack, like the numbers, like when I put the TrackMan next to the SkyTrack is pretty dialed. If I was looking for something, the major drawback to SkyTrack is you just get that delay when you hit it. But for, when you're talking a sub $5,000 launch monitor, and you're going to put something in your garage, like it is, it can get a little bit annoying. Like with the SkyTrack, I would think, like, I've never tried to hit on a range with it, but like launch monitors that just shoot the dot and you got to hit on that exact spot. I know with the SkyTrack I use, like you had to have the dot on the golf ball. Like it works great indoors, but outdoors, like hitting off of grass, that would get annoying quick, having to move the launch monitor after every single shot. Even with the Foresight and the TrackMan, you eventually have to move it off grass, but you got a pretty big hitting area, and that's where I haven't hit on and I don't know how you feel about it, Jim, but like I haven't hit on a bad launch monitor. I think there's something to be said about radar versus like indoors. I definitely like to have camera based, and outdoors I kind of like to have radar based. If I had to pick one or the other, like is my, like if I was going to have a garage setup, definitely something that's camera based. And that's the difference with IO versus TM4 is IO is more camera based and TM4 is more radar based, even though they have a little bit of both. It's, like just if you're willing to deal with those little bit of delays and those other things, I think you can accomplish, you can build a pretty sweet setup in your garage for $6-7 that, you can get a lot, especially with like GS Pro softwares out there. And, I think of another friend, like, he bought the launch monitor and a computer, and he just hit into a net. And then he bought a projector finally, and then he put up a bed sheet, and then he eventually bought an actual like screen for his sim in his garage. And like that's the great thing about it is you can kind of piecemeal your way through it, And a lot of launch monitors hold their value and price. So even I look at like I had a GC2 for a while, and that thing, I think I paid like at the time, like $7 or $8 for it and use it for teaching and sim stuff. And when I sold it like 2 or 3 years later, I still sold it for over $5,000, and that's another great thing is, and then I was able to level up into something better, and, but there are so many good things out there as far as like, if I were to go, so like with Golf Factory, the 2 that I kind of determined were the best for indoor play. If you're looking for strictly indoor play and just to be entertained and play golf courses, I'm a big fan of the Unicore and Over the Head if you have the space for it. I'm a big fan of center hitting if you have the room for it. like with Foresight and other ones, you can hit where you offset yourself if you don't have enough room, but you can center hit that Unicore, any of their launch monitors. Like they have the IXO, I believe. One requires special golf balls with dots on it, the other doesn't. And GS Pro, that to me is like, if I built one in my house right now, that's what I'd go with. Because I love TrackMan, but it actually is almost too much for what I would need for it in my house. Like I wouldn't be able to justify the cost in my house. With Unicore and GS Pro, I could go and play the Lido, and I could go play National Golf Links and do and that's what I find more interest in. Where TrackMan to me is an incredible tool for like a place like mine, a commercial setup, or if you're a high level player and you're looking to get better. Like there's so many neat things. I can do live scoring with leagues in here and other things that you don't need for your house, to be honest with you. And that's where I think the IO is a little bit better, because like they have a cheaper version of it with the software that you can get for like 15 grand that gets you in the door. For the bang for the buck, if I had, kind of unlimited budget in my house, I would still that Unicore with GS Pro, which isn't that, I think a Unicore launch monitor is around 9 grand. You can get they do some sales. And then GS Pro, I'm not sure what the deal is now. I think, but before you used to be able to buy a one-time license, and it's just, that to me, like, is that's what I'd be shooting for if I had the space for it, because it is center hitting.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, because when I was in Chicago and we had a space in our home in Chicago, we had the Foresight GC2. And I think once you meet sort of the standard of accuracy, when you trust the numbers, like that's the bar, like that's sort of the minimum bar. I think for some of the potentially cheaper ones, at least early on when I was looking at it, if you got to a point where like you just didn't trust the number, then it's sort of like, then you just couldn't trust anything, right? Then you just like sort of question, because you're trying to improve, right? You're trying to learn from this process. So you want the numbers to be accurate. But I think once you're getting accurate readings and you're not getting misreads, the GC2 is great. And it's like, that probably came out 15 years ago. Like, and that was sort of the gold standard for a while in golf stores. And, they're still there today. I think the gentleman that bought my house in Chicago, like he's still using that GC2 and is thrilled with it. So anyways, when we moved to Texas, we did get the Unicore, the IXO, and like you said, it sits on nice. It sits on the ceiling, which is great because we had a large room. It could be in the center of the room. We had high enough ceilings, so you can be lefty or righty. That was sort of the downside of the GC2 is it had to be on one side of the ball, and I guess the quad's the same way. So if you're playing, I'm left-handed, my son's left-handed, and that's fine. But if you have somebody over that's right-handed and you're trying to play in the same match, like you're flipping this thing around and it needs to be sort of level with where you're aiming, that gets annoying real quick. So we got the IXO, and their software in terms of their course software, like we never really used it, but it had the cameras, face on and down the line. And it was fine. Like it's super accurate, very happy with it. But we did migrate to the TrackMan this year only because, my son was needing to get more, I think, information in terms of club data, and just like the dialogue with his swing instructor, obviously is like using TrackMan as well. So they could be on the same page and just knowing like what numbers he needed to look for. And we've been happy with that as well.
Yeah. I hadn't used TrackMan in a little bit because we didn't have it when I was the last few places I worked. And when I'd worked at a bunch of simulator places and used a lot of software. And when I came back to like get back on TPS, like on TrackMan, it's like I forgot how insanely awesome, like from a practice side, and just TrackMan for practice and for elite players is just on a complete different level when it comes for indoor golf experiences and outdoor for that matter. The TPS, I love like breaking it up where you can see the club head and then seeing like, your dispersion pattern on the left, and just being able to see that 3D model of your club head and what you're doing at impact is just so incredible. It's they are just, to me, they are still light years ahead with their software and just what they can give you, if you're a good player. I know it comes with a tremendous cost, but they are, I can't say, I went with them. I used them for my business. It's just an incredible tool.
Super intuitive. Like the one thing this is just an aside, but I took for granted. It's like, I thought like the back of this thing, like it had to be like perfectly square to the target in order for it to be accurate. And like when you're in a space, like you might be hitting on one side of your mat or the other, just like slightly skewed. But it has that sort of auto alignment thing. So basically, wherever your ball is, if you hit it towards the middle of the screen, that's the definition of straight. And it just has this like grid that comes up and it auto aligns to that. Like I when the guy showed me that, I was like, oh, this is super brilliant. Cause I honestly didn't know how that was all going to work. I just thought you had to perfectly aim the unit to like perpendicular to your target, but that's not the case at all.
No, I know. And I was worried about that too, because it's like, I'm just, I have employees and they got to set the TrackMan up every day. And it's like, and I was worried about that, but it's incredible. It's just an amazing piece of machinery. And it's just what it's done kind of, and it's so cool to see it like migrate into baseball and now soccer. And that's another thing with anyone who uses a TM4 out there, they don't advertise it, but like you can actually do, like we play foot golf in here. For like, we'll play like the shortest par 3 courses and it'll read a soccer ball, your TM4. So you want to goof around and have some fun, like it will read a soccer ball. They don't advertise it because it's not like, it's not like a foolproof, but it's definitely, there's been some foot golf played in here at Golf Factory.
Yeah, back in episode 3, I had my Luke's strength instructor, Jared Phillips, and he said that they realized you could hit baseballs off a tee. If you put the TrackMan up on a platform that was sort of level with the tee, that it would read. So they were using it for that. So we haven't tried that, but you get a little home run derby, inside your golf room. That's pretty exciting.
That's cool. It's a cool piece of machinery.
Yeah, I think the only downside is, like you mentioned, GS Pro. Like they don't allow the outside integration, and a lot of these launch monitors, like they do allow the outside integration with the software. And GS Pro, I think, is what I would consider the gold standard in terms of third-party software, just because the dedication of the community in terms of creating courses that are like ultra realistic. And you can even find, it's kind of under the table, like versions of Augusta, TBC Sawgrass, that sort of thing. But there's just painstaking detail. I know the graphics on TrackMan are great, and I saw the flyovers on PGA Frisco. But I think with GS Pro, there's sort of like a labor of love that goes into the courses with some of the designers. Like I designed Ballyneal. That's still it's out
guys
there.
Like me and you doing it.
Yeah, they want it to be as precise, and they want it to be celebrated and respected amongst the community. So they really bring their A game. And you just see like the attention to detail in terms of like the course signage and just like all the little 3D like nuances. It's amazing how far it's come versus it doesn't look like arcade golf at all. One last thing I wanted to mention, just we've talked about all the launch monitors. My advice for folks that are trying to maybe think about building a space. I mentioned earlier, like when we talked about when it used to be sort of a luxury item and folks would want to sell you these all-in packages, probably like $50,000, $60,000 for like an all-in package. There are a lot of resources out on the internet because a lot of people have gone through this trying to get golf in their space and their unique kind of dimensions and trying to make it work, and a lot of creative thinking around that. I've done 2 spaces now, and I've done it all myself. I know you basically kind of built out everything, not only first in your home, but then also in the Golf Factory. But that you can do all of this stuff yourself. Honestly, I'm not like super handy, but you can source all of these resources probably for a half or a third of the cost that it would cost you if you were to buy it all in. Get a powerful gaming computer to run the software. I even found a resource of somebody had bought like a roll of the impact screen and was like pricing it up and selling it really for a fraction of the cost. The projector can be kind of tricky. Like it needs to be very specific for the throw distance and the dimensions of what you're trying to do. But there's like online wizards to help for that. But yeah, there's a lot of people that have been dipping their toes into this space and have experience to share, and like very happy to show like the obstacles that they went through and the solutions that they found and where they sourced all the different things. So it really has grown for folks, especially in the Midwest and in colder climates. They got the bug, man. They got the bug during the pandemic, and they want to keep it going. They want to keep improving. They don't want to take that 6 months off where you don't know what you're going to get the next spring when you first tee it up.
And it's amazing how much it fills the like need to play. Like it really does like feel like nowadays with how good the launch monitors are. And I will, going back to what you're saying, all my computers in here, I bought on a Black Friday sale at Costco. And it's like, I think understanding, you just got to figure out what the requirements are in that graphics card and your memory. And it's not as complicated. I'm not a computer whiz, and I was able to figure it out. And even your projector, it's like figuring out those ratios. But like, I will say 16:10 is what we do in here. But even we built these Sims ourselves. So I didn't pay for anything for labor, but these are about as beautiful a Sims as you can build. And these cost all in with everything in them. Then that's a top of the line screen, everything. We were about $35,000 per sim. So that's as top of the line as you can go building it yourself. And that's with I bought the triple layer. I have $1,000 screen, and I bought LCD projectors, Panasonics that are over 5,000 lumens. I got those, same thing though. I got those on a sale, and I paid around $2,000 for it. Versus some of those BenQ that are $5,000. The picture I'm getting off of this is incredible. So I think there's a lot, and I had touchscreen, Dell touchscreen, so it makes it a little more easy to interact. But I'm running as high end as you can get, and even that I was able to get down to about $35,000. So it's I think if you can get creative, I think you could build a really incredible setup in your house for less than $10,000. The way things are now.
Yeah. And the only dangerous thing is once you have a sim in your house, you can never go back. like when we were looking for houses in Texas, it was almost comical. Like we would look at these houses, and the first thing we would do, because they don't have basements here, is we would go up to the media room, check the height of the ceiling, and some of these houses we looked at, which are probably perfectly fine otherwise, like we would be in there 30 seconds, right? and all right. Ceiling doesn't work. All right, we're on to the next one, right? So yeah, once you go golf simulator in your house and you have the ability to basically hit balls anytime you want. Like I hit balls for like 20 minutes before we met, right? And it's just just bang a couple 7-irons and keep loose.
Little kids, like the only way I really play now is it's just at 10 o'clock at night, ripping. I can play 36 holes in like an hour. Yeah, it's just I love it. Obviously, I made it my business, so I definitely love it.
Yeah. So I'm going to be in Chicago next summer. I think Luke's probably playing in the Western Junior again. I definitely want to come up and check out your space and awesome. Just catch up with you. Yeah, folks, if you're in the Chicago area, check out Brian's space. It's the Golf Factory. It's in Mount Prospect, close to O'Hare. Come check out the space. It's awesome, and I couldn't be more excited for you. I mean, your passion and love for the game just shines through. And definitely shines through in this interview as well. And just anybody gets to meet you and interact with you, they're going to see it right away.
I appreciate the kind words. And anyone looking to talk golf, there's definitely, I know you got a little time. Even if you're on a layover, just take a quick cab ride over. I'll talk your ear off.
Before we get to Andrew, I want to let you know some exciting news. We have a new sponsor, StrackaLine Yardage Books. StrackaLine provides really best-in-class yardage books and green scans that are truly essential for any competitive junior golfer to get that edge entering a tournament. Through our partnership, StrackaLine is offering 20% off. Just enter code DRIVEN at checkout. Go to StrackaLine.com for more details. And with that, here's the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis. All right, Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis. What a coincidence. The segment's named after you.
Good to be back.
Last time we talked quite a bit about stats. We're in this season now. We talked to my friend Brian Hilko earlier this episode, just around off-season golf and indoor golf, him being in the Midwest. But I imagine a lot of golfers across the country, even here in Texas, are sort of winding down their tournament season and getting in to the off-season, thinking about 2024 golf. And I just wanted to get your perspective, with the golfers that you work with. What's the best practice around just the off-season discussion, developing off-season plans, setting goals for the following year, and coming up with a plan to attack that? So maybe give us a little bit of perspective on what you see as best practice in that space.
Yeah. I think the starting point in most of those conversations I have is reflecting on the year that you just had. Hopefully, players are in the practice of setting some outcome and performance goals for the year, just so they can objectively look back, stats aside, just saying, did I achieve any of the things that I wanted to, whether that's, something tangible like a trophy or something that you can track like a scoring average. But when you're looking to 2024, I would start with, I always ask this question, like if we're sitting here a year from now, like what would you hope would have happened in a year? Let's just say this is a fairly competitive player. Maybe that's, winning their first 2-day event, or I'm getting fully exempt on the AJGA. Whatever those things are, it would be nice to have them written down in some like tangible way, something they could look at. And so from there, it then leads to, well, what are the gaps in my performance that are likely causing me not to be reaching these goals? And so from there, I probably would be trying to come up with 4 or 5 areas, hopefully backed up with statistics, but doesn't necessarily have to be. For example, I have a couple players where they clearly don't hit it far enough. They don't necessarily need to be on TrackMan all the time, like testing their club head speed. But a goal would be I need to be gaining club head speed. And then from there, I can make a plan. Like I'm going to start seeing a physical trainer. I'm going to order some type of speed training system. And I would probably come up with something in like each of the disciplines, like full swing, short game, putting, mental skills, tournament preparation. And if I have a goal in each one of those, then likely I'm going to see some improvement. And I think the more detail you can give those, you're likely going to reach those. In the beginning of 2024 to maybe the spring, it would be nice to like check in on those things to see how they're going and see if you need to like make an audible, because generally speaking, the summer is the most important part of like a junior's schedule. So by summertime, like you should be really, really caught up on what those 4 or 5 things are so that you have a really good summer, which will likely lead to meeting most of your goals in 24.
I think one of the things, it's tough to get off of the tournament cycle. And I think you really have to view it as an opportunity and as a gift to sort of be half a step removed or a step removed from tournament golf. Because I think these development things, like you obviously want to be getting better, but when you talk about like swing speed, when you're in the tournament season, like you always want to be ready to be able to play your best golf. So it's hard to really make a large investment in something where you might actually get worse before you get better, right? But when you have a chunk of, say, 3 or 4 months in between tournaments, you can really take that opportunity to make a large investment in your game and development. I do think, like you said, you need to have these checkpoints along the way. So some sort of test to show like, hey, you're making progress, or just probably check-ins with you in terms of how things are going, and, still be able to get, some sort of a gamification and there's some sort of game-like situation that shows like, hey, we are making progress in the right direction. Like the work that you're putting in is getting us closer to that goal. Right.
Yeah. It's really rare for any level of golfer to have like 2 to 4 months off. Hopefully, like you just said, hopefully you're having those conversations with a coach. It's a lot to ask for just like a single junior player to come up with all this and to check this all on their own. So if you do have a coach, I would be having these conversations with them. Hopefully they're the ones leading it. Maybe that's a sign of a good coach that they're leading these conversations. And if not, then just bring it up saying, hey, can you help me come up with like 4 or 5 areas that you think I need to improve on? And if you do have those 2 to 4 months off, then I think you're totally right. It is such an opportunity and it really doesn't happen often. So lean into it. I know it can be hard, like not playing tournaments, because it's kind of hard to know if you're getting better. But if you're doing those things over those 2 to 4 months, you're likely going to see a lot of fruit when the tournament season does start back up.
Yeah, especially on driving distance, right? You'll be finding new places, new spots on the course you probably hadn't found before, reaching par 5s that you hadn't reached before, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm like, if we did take driving distance is something that is very, very easy to see like the fruit, because you can see a gain in club head speed, and then you can see a gain in ball speed. And maybe that even has to do with like getting fit for a driver, so my spin's better. I mean, you could say, I want to gain 50 yards, which is I got to gain X amount of ball speed. I got to lose X amount of spin. I'm going to add half an inch to my driver. Like, this is a very tangible way. For some of the other things, for example, like maybe it's mental skills are like a little bit more difficult to like tangibly see the fruit. You know it's there, and maybe you do like a mental scorecard. So again, if you can be as detailed in those things as you can, I think then you can like easily see, okay, I did gain some ground in this area.
You talked about goal setting. Can you talk a little bit about like the top elite players that you've seen, or some of the even the professional players that you've been around or observed? Like, describe sort of their ability to describe their game, like articulate their game, articulate their needs, and articulate their goals. I imagine it can be very, very precise because they're able to articulate their games in a very nuanced fashion. Does that help in those discussions?
Yeah, I think as you get closer to the mountaintop, like the goals become more clear too. For example, if you're a top ranked junior in the country, like the things that are the mountaintop things, most kids that aren't even in that space could also say those, like AJGA wins or being a Rolex player of the year or qualifying for US Junior. And when you're a lower level junior, let's say you're starting to compete, it's hard to say like what that goal would be because it's a little bit more vast as far as your opportunity. Like there's a ton of things to do where there's only one US Junior or one US AM. And so even with professional players saying, I want to earn Corn Ferry status, there's only one or two ways to do that. And then once they have that goal, it becomes very, very easy to work your way back because it's so limited in how you would go about doing that. And then if they do have statistics to back that up, the outcome turning into the performance-based stuff, it's very easy to find the performance areas that it's going to take to reach those things. Again, as we have talked about many times, set a goal, set something objective, and just work your way backward. Always has to start. I think it always has to start with some type of outcome, whether you are trying to be on the PGA Tour or you're just trying to go and play your first competitive event. Like I remember when my son played his first tournament, it was literally, let's just set the goal. We're just going to go play a tournament, which now means I have to be educated as to how to sign up for a tournament, where the tournament is, maybe go play a practice round. Like there are going to be little things that obviously a tour player is not going to have to think on that level. But you will grow in your knowledge of like how to achieve these things if you just start with the objective goal.
Yeah, and we had this similar conversation with my son Luke just a few weeks ago, Andrew, and I think it's exactly that. I mean, I think we started with just having him talk about his goals for the upcoming year and articulate where he thought his game was at and what he needed to work on. I think the stats definitely played a role in those conversations, and that was what hopefully I was able to bring to the table. And I think the thing is, like, it's nice when the stats provide the support in an objective way that supports sort of what the player is seeing and experiencing in the field. And I think that was the case in our discussion. And I think that gave us really the focus around the goals. We were able to sort of quantify what were the things, like the largest gaps between where he was in 2023 and where he wanted to be in 2024. And then I think the next step was like, okay, well, let's come up with the plan of attack to try to address that. And in our case, like you said, we have about 3.5 months of downtime. How are you going to just start chipping away at this? Like, what does, how often is he meeting with you, and what are the things you're going to work on? And, coming up with a practice plan and a development plan that, like you said, makes you ready and bulletproof for summer 2024 to be able to achieve, what frankly were very lofty goals going into next year. So I think that's, in my mind, seeing the process come together. But I think it really starts with the player being able to articulate exactly what where they think their game is, and where they want to be, like you said, a year from now. Yeah,
it really is up to the player. I think when a player has very clear goals, hopefully his team around him, like you and I are doing for Luke, or like I'm doing for the players that I coach, can help lay a very clear framework to how would I actually achieve that. And are these goals things that I think that I could achieve in 2024? If you're a beginner competitive junior, saying that you're going to go win on the AJGA next summer is probably not like the most realistic thing. But that may be a goal that you want in 4 or 5 years. So if we had that mountaintop goal, we could work our way back 4 or 5 years to go, okay, in 4 or 5 years it's going to look like this. What are the first steps in 2024 that I would hopefully take that would in 2030 or 2029, I can see that as a realistic thing, which one of those would be gaining competitive experience. Okay, I need to play in 12 events this year. That would be a good starting point. And something that would make the road seem much more tangible versus just saying, well, I hope in 6 years that this just kind of works out. This hoping that things happen. It's a strategy. I don't know if it's a good one.
Any guidance for parents on this front? Because I imagine one thing that I would sort of caution is focusing too much on what like one other individual or junior, say in your state, or somebody who's ranked ahead of you, or even like somebody who might be in your kid's grade who's eons of where your son or daughter is now. And I think as parents, like we get caught in that trap of FOMO or focusing too much on any one individual. So can you talk a little bit about like just maybe tempering those expectations? And like you said, like setting realistic goals and helping the parent realize like their son or daughter's on this journey. And it may take time and it may be on a different pace. But if we set these goals and we keep chipping away at it, like we'll make progress on that front.
Yeah, I mean, that is, whenever I read any like parenting, like sport, document or like book, it always says never compare your kid to another kid. Like that, it doesn't matter like what it is. That's always the one thing. Don't talk about the performance within 24 hours and don't talk about other kids. I really do think there's a lot of truth to that because everyone is starting this race at a different point. And oh, by the way, the race doesn't have an ending. Like it doesn't end when your kid goes to college because guess what? They get to college and now they're playing against the best players in the country. So you've never really achieved the end goal. Even if you reach number one in the world, guess what? There's 100 guys behind you that are trying to catch you. So I think patience from the parent's perspective, listen to your child and what they want and what they're desiring to do. And then all you can do is just put them in the best space, hopefully with a good coach that can kind of like drive the ship to help them reach those things. Inevitably, I think a kid will probably try to compare themselves, especially if there's like this kid that's just like destroying them every week and just saying, stay patient, stay patient. Luckily, I have a lot of experience with this as my son, he's kind of been on the smaller side. He hasn't been able to like dominate, local tours like some of the kids have. And just for years, I've just said, hey, we just got to keep focusing on what we're doing. As you get bigger, you're going to have more and more chances. And as the last year or so have happened, he's definitely starting to like show some fruit from our patience and like being good at the things that we can control, like chipping and putting and bunkers and course strategy and tournament preparation. To where, I'm hoping that as he gets, bigger, faster, stronger, all those things that we did 4 or 5 years ago will really serve him as now he can hit it as far as everybody. So that's kind of a tangible example, just from my life. And I've had other kids that are in similar. I just had a kid the other day I saw that I'm telling him, let's just be patient. I know you jumped up in yardage. There's nothing you can do. Like just control the things that you can control, which is your effort, your attention, and your conversations, and be patient.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would leave on that's great advice is I mentioned it earlier, and I also mentioned it to my son, that if you think of it as an investment and think of it as the amount of work that you put in this off season, like your performance next year is largely going to be a function of that hard work, that investment. And like I said, just like you say, like climbing a mountain, right? You got to do it one step at a time. You got to put the work in. You can't skip any steps along the way. And I think if you just view it as just really an investment in your future golf performance, and just really attack it that way, like you'll see the fruits of that labor, and it will be like, it'll be extremely rewarding. Like I think just that journey, just enjoying the journey and enjoying the work and enjoying the process.
I think, Andrew, I would add a little caveat. If it's not working, like what you were doing is not working. I do see a lot of people that just like stay down the path, whether that be with their current coach or, with their current schedule, and they just kind of stay the same and they're very, very frustrated. Like, don't be afraid to change it up. Like, it's okay. This is a performance-based business. If you're not succeeding or you're not getting better, then you should question like what you're doing. And that's okay. People change coaches, people get new clubs, people go see, mental coaches, they go see different trainers. It's totally fine. You should to a degree, you should kind of always be questioning your path just to make sure that you're on the right path, or else you're just going to kind of wake up one day and be like, oh, it's been 5 years and I'm kind of in the same spot. So, don't be afraid of some change.
Yeah. Okay. So on that note, if folks have any questions, how can they reach out to you?
Easiest way would go to my Instagram at Andrew Lewis Golf. Just shoot me a message and I'd be happy to help in any way I can.
All right. Awesome. Appreciate the time, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
All right. This segment is The Big Idea. We want to welcome back Peter Flory. If you recall, we had him back talking about his work at the Lido Golf Course, which just opened at Sand Valley Resort in Wisconsin. And if you listen to that episode, and I'd highly encourage you to check it out, Pete talked about his involvement using technology, digital tools to recreate a course which hadn't existed the last 70 years, and it really built, which I think is going to be one of the most monumental new course projects in recent times. But Pete, I wanted to get your expertise. I know that we've talked about this in the past. And you actually were on a Friday podcast where you were talking about the possibility of artificial intelligence developing golf courses and golf course routings. I think where you guys landed on that there's many constraints that would make that extremely difficult, if not impossible. But that technology is rapidly developing, as I'm sure you're aware of. But talk a little bit about that, that discussion, 4 or 6 months ago on the Fried Egg. And I'm just wondering, in terms of a big idea, if there is a potential path forward for this technology, if you see one.
Yes, I think the thing that Garrett wanted to talk about was I just posted some things from Midjourney and some other, artificial intelligence kind of rendering tools. That stuff obviously wasn't trained on golf, but I was kind of seeing if I could make it generate believable golf holes, and going through that whole process was really interesting, trying to figure out how to harness that tool. If you just kind of give it a prompt or feed it certain pictures, it spits out some pretty generic stuff, but you can kind of get weird with it, and you can sort of learn how to push it and pull it in certain ways, and sort of by the end, it feels like you're sort of the conductor, and you're kind of like, it almost feels like your own creation at the end, even though it's really not. You just go through generations of trial and error until it kind of gives you what you want. You adapt the prompts. So I think that was, that's what Garrett was interested in. There's a lot of maybe conflation between different technologies when people want to talk about this stuff. There's the digital rendering stuff. There's the LiDAR, the GPS dozers. There's AI is sort of creeping into it. So there's a lot of tools sort of emerging that architects can utilize and all that. So yeah, I think some people, they want to talk about like the Terminator effect and, how it's going to ruin things and all that. But I really do believe that it's a pretty human art form, golf, and that these things are mainly going to be tools that architects just utilize to do their job either more efficiently or a little bit better.
I guess as far as like my big idea of this, and like I'm not an expert in AI models. I sort of dabble a little bit in that space as part of my profession, so I know enough to be dangerous. But I think I reached out to you probably even 4 or 5 years ago now about what is the possibility of having an AI generated course routing, which is really one of the most critical pieces of a golf course design, and one of the things that we debate and discuss quite heavily. I was thinking in terms of like where I would start around that is like, you have these digital maps, which are really digital topo maps. Could you use information from, say, like the Confidential Guide in terms of what's a good hole versus a bad hole, or some of these other resources in terms of like what are the top courses in the world, and basically scan these digital maps to find if you can recreate some of these holes with minimal earth movement, right? And the other thing I think we talked about a couple weeks ago or at Lido is like, how about like a mirrored version of that hole? Think of like the 13th hole at Augusta playing right to left. Well, wouldn't it be cool if like you had the land to build it basically going left to right, right? It's basically the same strategic elements. But like if you could run an automated search to try to find these places or like natural green sites, going through some of the same process that a golf course architect might go through when they're first looking at a topo, and like, where do you start, right? You're looking for like fairway corridors, green sites, and then like maybe a logical place for the next tee and a place and a direction to go from there without having to move mountains to be able to do that. And I'm just wondering if there's a possibility of kind of bringing that forward. The one use case that I would see as a potential way of impacting the game in a positive fashion would be, could you do this on the cheap and actually get sort of Tom Doak influenced decision making in terms of golf course routing, but on projects that Tom Doak would never consider, or like Gil Hanse or Corin Crenshaw or whomever. But basically like municipal projects where maybe there's existing land. I think about Common Ground, which, if Common Ground were in any city, it'd probably be the most popular golf course in that city. Right? I assume you've played it in Denver. But, they took an existing course and they turned it into one of the most fun strategic tracks, and they built it for relatively cheap, right? So if you took and inserted a digital map and ran it through this process to find and route holes in such a way where the objective functions were to like find quality holes and minimize land movement, which is some function of like cost, right? That you might be able to get, like I said, sort of Doak influence on your course designs in a way that would bring these sorts of interesting and challenging and fun golf courses to the masses that these modern architects probably wouldn't touch in their, in terms of taking on their projects. Like, do you think there's a potential path forward there?
So I think, I think kind of what you're talking about is sort of like not so much AI, but building an algorithm to basically almost automate the routing process, based on a set of rules and taking the constraints of the site into account. So I think that's definitely possible. And it's, it'd be obviously you'd have to be very creative in your programming. And the constraints are, obviously many, like you don't want 5 par 3s in a row, stuff like that. You don't want to tee off into the rising sun or finish in the setting. There's a million things that we don't think about that the architects are trying to do out there.
Yeah. And I would think like one example that you could set as a default setting is like returning nines. Like I think a municipal course is probably going to get a lot of its revenue on 9-hole rounds. You don't want to be finishing 2 miles from the clubhouse, right? So that's one thing you could just set as a constraint right away.
Yeah, and the thing that comes to mind is like in this software that I've used, you can do that. So you can set up a random plot and it'll route it for you. And I don't think they put a ton of effort into making sure that routing was optimal or anything else. But it's just a clear demonstration that can be done. You can do a new one and it sort of is randomized, but it doesn't have a bunch of par 3s in a row. It does clearly have some logic behind it. So you could clearly enhance that. I just think about like these courses in Chicago where I'm just thinking like the routing there's nothing to route around, like a lot of places, Florida and here, it's like, part of what you're routing around is houses that you want to build and stuff like that. Some properties would be a really cool challenge, some hilly properties and all that, how to best utilize them. And you could make rules, you don't want to climb a certain slope or, could limit blindness and all that. It would be challenging. I mean, the interesting part to me is I think the other thing you were touching on, where you're kind of thinking of something that could mimic kind of the creativity of certain artists out there. You know, in music, that's kind of an emerging field in AI is, you know, could you make a melody that's like similar to what John Lennon would have done? You know, he has kind of a signature in terms of the way that he approaches melodies and the root notes and all that. And that's, you know, I think that's possible. Like they have things where you can do a melody that's Bach-like or Beethoven-like and all that. You know, they're not there, but that's more of like an AI application, I think, is trying to feed on a database of what makes an artist unique and then trying to extrapolate that to new original work. I don't know. So I guess at some point you could have a digital Tom Doak.
Yeah, actually, I gave it the acronym Design of Automated Courses. So DOAC. I couldn't get a K in there, but it's going to have the acronym DOAC. And that's the big idea, is kind of run with that. So I may toy with it. Like you mentioned Midjourney. I was pretty early on that. And I had actually an Instagram account where I would post a different concept each day, mostly just kind of mashups of different things. And I know that I haven't done it in a while, but it's on version 5 or 6. And I want to go back and use like the same prompts that I did early on and just see how far it's gone. And this technology is moving so fast that some of these things that we think are, that would be really difficult to solve, it is probably solving much more complex problems than that. It just needs a little bit of time and effort and some coding skills to be able to do it. So at some point, I'm going to try to at least dabble in it, and we'll see what comes out of it. Or if somebody wants to take this idea and run with it, you can even use the acronym. I won't hold it against you.
And the core, like the way something like Midjourney works is pretty interesting. Like it starts with a random kernel, and you can sort of change that. It has a code. So if you want to start with the same random kernel and tweak your parameters separately, you could do that. But it's interesting. It starts with something completely random and it adds to it randomly until it starts to recognize things in its database based on what you're trying to prompt it toward. And then it sort of fills it out from there. So it's very interesting, I think, for me to see kind of literally the kernels of where creativity starts. It starts a little bit with randomization. I think creative people have a little bit of that built in their brains, that when they're trying to be creative, they can really be super flexible and try ideas that other people wouldn't, are outside their parameters, sort of, they wouldn't go there.
Well, I appreciate your perspective on that. And like I said, if anyone wants to run with that as an idea, and you might have a tremendous positive impact on, golfers all across the country, all across the world. I'd love to see a world where the best designers are still doing their creative efforts, but we get this outreach of really fun, exciting, compelling golf to the masses. The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.